Hey guys, today I'm talking about planting elephant garlic in containers, and as you can see, this garlic is actually huge. There's only 5 cloves on this particular set, and this one only has 4. So this garlic is more than double the size of a standard garlic, but I'm going to talk about putting it in grow bags and starting it in the fall and getting an early start to our garlic for next spring and for an earlier harvest than ever next summer. So elephant garlic is not actually real garlic. It's more closely related to the leek, and it's in the allium family. I made a video about allium flowers, and I'll link that up above if you want to take a look. But the allium garlic or allium flower is an interesting flower to grow, but it is not edible like this elephant garlic. So let's get started on putting this together, and I'll show you how to do it in these grow bags and make some suggestions along the way to help make sure that you get the maximum harvest from your elephant garlic. It's really good, and it tastes a lot better than just standard garlic. Now, garlic is going to want a very, very well nutritious soil, but also it needs to be extremely well draining. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 part of our homemade potting mix, and I'll link that up above where you can save 75% off of your potting soil. Then we're going to use black cow, which is a composted cow manure you can find at the larger hardware stores, the big box stores here in America. And lastly, we're going to add some additional perlite to help with drainage. So we're going to put the 3 of these together and try not to breathe the dust because it's not good for your lungs. And we're just going to keep adding this and mix it together until we have about 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. And then we're going to top it with a special ingredient that will also help the garlic grow quite well. I'm going to come around to the other side so I can get some of our homemade potting soil. And this is truly a way to save money off of premium mix. It's so much cheaper to make it yourself. I'm kind of eyeballing this. I'm not using a container, but I'm just kind of counting the number of hand scoops I'm doing and make sure we have a nice mixture here. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to mix this by hand. All right, we're going to fill our grow bag, and you can use a 5-gallon bucket, but I've got to where I really like these grow bags. They're so easy to use, and I think they are more easy to transport, move around the garden, and the root system seems to like it better as well. And we don't have to worry about swirling roots in these type of bags. I think the roots grow better, and it's almost like they seem to be more prone to circling in 5-gallon buckets and causing a root issue there. So I'm going to finish topping these off, and we'll head back up to the top of the table to talk about all the nuances of planting elephant garlic. Okay, so we've got our grow bag filled with our premium potting mix mixed with our compost and additional perlite to help with drainage. And so we'll move forward from here and talk about how all the steps in planting our elephant garlic. Now, your pH on growing the elephant garlic needs to be between 6 and 7, and that's where a good pH monitor comes in. I consistently recommend having one of those, maybe 2 in your garden as one as a backup, because it's so important to monitor your pH in the soil. Without proper pH, plants cannot absorb the nutrients as they would if the pH was at the correct level for that plant. So just remember, a good pH monitor is going to help your plant every step along the way. So fall is a great time to plant elephant garlic, about 4 to 6 weeks before your first hard frost. I'm about a month away from a light frost, so this should give me plenty of time to get it into the pot, get it outside, and allow it to adapt to that outdoor temperature. But if we get some extremely, extremely cold days, I will probably bring it into the greenhouse, and I do recommend doing that if you're planting in a grow bag. If it's out in the open ground or your raised beds, then you just need to add extra straw to protect it from an extremely hard freeze. Now, each one of these cloves can be separated from the main bulb, and they can grow an entire new bulb. So we want to plant about 3 per bag because these are going to get quite large. So I would suggest in a 5-gallon bucket container, no more than 3 per bucket. Now, each clove should be planted about 2 to 3 inches deep in the soil, and we're going to separate them about 6 to 8 inches apiece. So that's why we have limited space in a container like this. In the open beds where I'm going to plant some more later this week, I'm going to give it a lot more bulbs or cloves in each spot, but in something where we're confined to space, just remember about 3 per this size container, about a 5-gallon bucket or slightly smaller. You don't want to put 4, 5, or 6 because there's going to be too much crowding for the bulbs to grow properly. Now you want to consistently water your garlic, but you don't want to overwater, which can lead to rot. So just remember, you want to use your pH meter, and it also comes, this particular model comes with a soil moisture meter, and that's something you want to keep track of. Moist but not waterlogged. That's an important thing to remember. Now once I plant the garlic, I'm going to go back and I'm going to top it with straw. But one thing to remember is that you want to make sure that the straw was never sprayed with an herbicide. A lot of the straws you buy at the big box store, you don't know either way. So if you can purchase from a farmer who's grown his own hay, that is a great option to have. This straw is organic and it's never been sprayed with an herbicide, so I know it's safe to top it as a protective agent above my garlic if we get some really cold weather and I don't have a chance to get it inside. Now we're going to go ahead and plant our garlic, and like I said, it's going to be about 2 to 3 inches, so I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to bring it in closer so you can see exactly where I'm planting this in the cloth bag container. Okay, I'm just going to push these to a depth about 2 to 3 inches, and like I said previously, I'm only putting in about 3 cloves per bag because these are huge. The individual cloves are the size of an entire garlic, so that makes a huge difference. So we don't want to crowd these in there, and even these, as large as this bag is, we still may have some issues with crowding. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the balanced fertilizer. This is a slow release balanced fertilizer, and it's made by Osmocote, and I use it quite a bit on bonsai. I'm just going to pour it into my hand and just kind of sprinkle it on the top. And another thing I'm going to add is worm castings. That really is going to add a lot of microbial action there, so I'm just going to put that in about a 1/4 of an inch layer all the way around before we come back in at the last thing and add our mulch. So I'm just going to carefully put this all the way around the bag and before we take it outside the water. So I just want to make sure I have a nice layer of worm castings. I'll link this down below because I think worm castings are one of the most important things that you can have in your garden when you're growing vegetables or anything you're going to consume, because they really make a huge difference in the growth pattern and speed at which they grow. So that worm casting is something really good. All right, so we're going to lastly top this with some organic straw, and I'll have to probably add a little bit more, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm just showing you how this is going to go on top of the bag. And I'm probably going to go 2 or 3 inches above this because I want to make sure it's protected. And then once the spring gets here, I'll probably remove about 75% of the straw to allow the growth of the garlic to come up through that thinner layer of straw a little bit easier. Now this slow release fertilizer will work over the next 3 to 6 months and help aid the growth of the roots and the bulb get larger. But once springtime gets here, I always recommend using Bloom Plus, and that's going to really help because it's got a super high phosphorus amount. So we want to get that bloom under the ground level growing even faster and larger. So Bloom Plus has an extremely high phosphorus count, and that's what I always recommend doing to make sure your garlic maximizes its possible size. So your garlic is going to go through 3 stages, which will be leaf development, bulb development, and then maturation, which will allow the bulb to become as large as possible in that later stage of growth. Now, although garlic is a biennial, it's often grown just as an annual because of the desired result, which is bulb harvesting. So that's one thing to remember, is that you can continue to grow this year after year just by following a few practices and replanting the individual cloves and just continuing to get that harvest where you'll never have to buy garlic again. And elephant garlic is not exactly the cheapest, so this is one that you definitely want to keep regrowing year after year. Now during the leaf growing cycle, you may have some scapes that emerge, which is a green stalk that also comes out with your leaves. If you remove those, that will redirect that energy back under the soil to the bulbs to maximize their size. Now if you don't want to use a synthetic fertilizer, you might want to try bone meal as far as that goes, because this is really a great high phosphorus count product and it's all natural. So you'll know an easy way to determine when it's time to harvest your garlic is when the bottom third of the leaves turn brown but the upper part is still green. So that is an indicator that it's time to harvest your garlic. Now curing your garlic also is going to take about 2 to 3 weeks. You want to keep it in a dry location where it's well ventilated, maybe have a fan on a timer that allows it to cure and dry through that process. Once you've cured your garlic, it can last up to 10 months if you store it in a cool, dry area. So just remember, garlic is one of those things that you can have year-round if it's properly cured and stored. Now you can also increase the germination rate of your elephant garlic by storing it in a refrigerator for a few weeks before you decide to plant it. That process is known as stratification, and it can greatly increase the amount of garlic that you're going to have the next summer. Now, if you're planting this garlic in an open ground area near tomatoes or in your raised beds, that's an excellent idea because garlic makes an excellent companion plant as it can repel certain pests. So just remember, if you're planting tomatoes and garlic together, that can really be a beneficial symbiotic relationship. Now, if you eat a lot of eggs like I do, I always recommend saving the shells because you can crush them extremely finely or put them in a little bit of water in a blender and really puree them in a blender and then pour that over the top of the soil, and that can add extra calcium, and that's really something that garlic will benefit from very quickly. So if you don't want to go to all the trouble of saving eggshells and crushing them and putting them in the soil, a little bit of gypsum will also help, and that will add some calcium to your soil. Another note about adding fertilizers to your soil is too much nitrogen can cause your bulbs to be smaller. It'll put more growth into the leaves on the top of the soil, growing up above, and put less energy into that. So that's why I always recommend going with a high phosphorus product like Schultz, and that will put that energy down below. It does have nitrogen in it, but not near as much phosphorus content, and that's really something so important when you're growing elephant garlic. So when you're watering your garlic during the growing season, you want to do really deep waterings, but not as frequently, because if you do more frequent waterings over and over, you're going to have smaller and less successful bulb formation. So just remember, you want to do a deep watering maybe once a week rather than a daily watering of a shallower or smaller amount. You'll know that you've had a really successful growing season with garlic if the stalks get to about 24 to 36 inches tall. So that is a sign that your garlic has really formed really nicely under the soil. Now, another thing to remember about planting these cloves is you want to make sure you get an organic clove because some of them may have been treated with a growth inhibitor to allow there to be more time at the grocery store where they don't form any type of leaves. So just remember, that prevents sprouting and will also prevent the garlic from growing in your garden. So guys, throughout the fall and winter, if you have really cold winters, you want to consider putting a massive amount of straw around the garlic to prevent it from frost damage. And that's just one of those things you might have to do depending on your zone. So that's something I'm going to do is I'm just going to add more, the ones that are staying outside, I'm adding more straw around it just to protect it. Now there's going to be a couple I'm going to be taking in and out of the greenhouse, and I'm going to kind of do an experiment of see which one works better, whether bringing in and out of the greenhouse or just leaving it out in the open cold for the elephant garlic. So guys, elephant garlic really does have a milder and sweeter flavor. I hope you'll consider growing some because it's really something unique. So guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If I've left something out or you something you have to say as far as a comment goes, just leave it down below, and have a great day.